And good evening, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, as always, Tony Defio. Thank you for joining me on this very cold Friday evening in Pittsburgh. And I hope it's warmer and more pleasant wherever you happen to be in Steeler Nation. If you're not in Pittsburgh, of course. If you are in Pittsburgh, then you know what I'm talking about. But still, I know a lot of people out there who are in California and Hawaii and London who want to be in Pittsburgh. So maybe you're yearning for that cold weather. But I thank you for joining me. And before I continue, as always, I'd like to please encourage you to subscribe and like our Behind the Steel Curtain YouTube channel, where we bring you live podcasts each and every day and night, including this one, Steelers Hangover, Steelers Preview, Steelers Post-Game Show, the Scobro Show, Know Your Enemy, Touchdown Under. The list goes on and on. Please check it out. And you can check all those shows out live also on Facebook. So if you're watching me on Facebook right now, hello, welcome. And of course, you can check out all of our live shows after the fact if you can't catch them live. And if you don't want to, as Brian always says, if you don't want to stare at our faces, you can catch them on any audio platform of your choosing. All you have to do is download parts 1 and 2, if there are 2. Sometimes there are 3 parts, but usually 2. So you can catch those after the fact. And of course, we have audio only shows exclusively that you can catch on any audio platform, including the Live Mic, Let's Ride, the Stat Geek, the War Room, From the Cutting Room Floor, What Yin's Talking About. So many great shows. We have fantasy football. We have everything you need in a podcast. And of course, please check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website. We bring you news, commentary, film breakdown, anything Steelers related. We're here to bring it for you 24/7, 365, basically. And I don't know if we're 24/7, but definitely we have the 365 part covered. So please check us out. As I like to say, it is the best Steelers website on the internet. It is certainly my favorite, and I've been with them for 11 years. So please check out everything related to Behind the Steel Curtain, both in print or text and in audio, meaning podcasts. So hello, and let's see who we have in the live chat. We have Andrew Wilbar, who I have not seen in a while. He's been busy at college, but he's our draft guru. He's always churning out the stock reports. Or I'm sorry, the stock reports. The draft reports for next year's prospects. We have Stacy Lynn, Steeler Chick 46, who was the first one in. Hello, Steeler Chick. Ryan O'Toole, Micah, George Teston, Kathy Ford, Steelers Pittsburgh, Daniel Micello, and he says, love your insight, Tony. Happy late Thanksgiving. Well, thank you, and happy Thanksgiving to you too, Daniel. Speaking of my insight, what is my insight about the Steelers' latest game, the 41-37 loss to the Chargers in LA last Sunday night? I thought it was crappy. That's my insight. Time to go home. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, I've had, as is always the case, I've had time to process last Sunday's loss to the Chargers on Sunday Night Football. And, you kind of, this is what people don't understand. Like when you're always writing and doing podcasts and you're reacting in the moment, you're reacting a day later, reacting 2 or 3 days later, your perspective changes. Last Monday, when I wrote about the game, when I watched the game, and then I wrote about it and talked about it on the podcast on the Hangover with Brian and Shannon, I was pretty annoyed because, they had a chance to win at the end. And yes, the defense was compromised due to a lot of injuries and COVID cases. But they had to do was make one last stop at the end, and they couldn't do it. And of course, all the stuff that happened during the game, like the decision to go for it on 4th and goal early in the game, and they got nothing out of it. But looking back on it now and gaining some perspective, I mean, they were down so many starters on defense. I mean, they were down T.J. Watt. I mean, usually you don't have to go further than that when you're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers and what makes them go in this day and age. But they were also without Joe Hayden. They were without Minkah Fitzpatrick, who was down with COVID. They were that's probably, arguably 3 of their 4 or 5 top defensive players, and of course you add Stephon Tuitt and Tyson Alualu to the mix, and it's a tough thing for them to overcome. If you would have told me back in August that's at some point just before we knew how long Tuitt would be out, and of course Alualu would have his season-ending injury. If you would have told me back in August that at some point during the season they would be without those 5 players, I would say, well, on defense, they're going to lose that game. So, and of course you have when you have players like Devin Bush, not really. We talked about him. He's been a popular or unpopular subject for the last few weeks. He really hasn't been picking up his game. Yes, he's suffering from the ACL, or he's still recovering from the torn ACL from last year, but you'd like to see more from him at this point, even 13 months after a major knee injury. Of course, Cam Heyward played spectacularly, and what more can you say about that guy? As I wrote about on Friday, he's if nothing else, 2021 is showing us all how special he is, and more about him later. But it was one of the game went along pretty much as I expected. I predicted in our weekly prediction, our staff predictions, I predicted 31-7 Chargers, because I thought, missing all those players on defense, it was going to be impossible to slow the Chargers down. Justin Herbert's a fantastic quarterback. Keenan Allen always gives them problems. Eckler, it's just a great, potent offense, even though they had been struggling. Still, I mean, when you're down 5 starters on defense, it's hard to make up for that, as I said. But even though the game went as I expected through 3 quarters, I was really pleasantly surprised to see how they fought back really in the 4th quarter, from the late 3rd quarter on. I mean, it was quite the comeback, and it was jump-started in many ways by Miles Killebrew's blocked punt. It was 27-13. It was 27-10, and then it was 27-13, and then he blocks that punt, and the Steelers immediately take advantage. Najee Harris scores to make it 27-20, and you're feeling pretty good. But boom, the defense gives up another quick touchdown, and at that point, it was 34-20. I think there was like 8 minutes left in the 4th quarter. I'm thinking, that's it. Just get this game over with. I'm going to go to bed. I started orientation last week for my new job, and I knew it was going to be a long week. I said, I don't want to watch another. But they kept me in it. And just when I thought it was out, they pulled me back in. The quote, whoever said that, I think it was Al Pacino. Anyway, they made it 34-27, and then they had that the play of the game, in my opinion, if you're a Steeler fan, was the deflected pass at the line of scrimmage by Heyward. His 7th of the year, by the way. Just the guy's just having a great year. And I thought Cam Sutton made a great play to stay with it and make the interception. And he took a hard hit to the head after that. And, of course, the Steelers converted that into a game-tying touchdown, and with about 4 minutes left. And not long after that, the defense actually made a crucial stop when the Chargers decided to go for it. I think it was 4th and 2 from, I think, their own 35, and the Steelers stopped them. I think Heyward was instrumental in that play too, if I'm not mistaken. So, the Steelers parlayed that into a field goal by Chris Boswell, and you're feeling pretty good, 37-34. Making the comeback the way they did, you're kind of feeling euphoric at that point. The Steelers are gonna close this out, and what a great story this would be. But again, the defense just wasn't up to the task, and really quickly gave up a 75-yard touchdown drive, culminating in a 53-yard touchdown from Herbert. Trey Norwood didn't look great on that play. I mean, he was starting in place of Fitzpatrick. I mean, he had a solid game all around, I thought, but he didn't look great on that play, and he was supposed to be the last line of defense, and he took a bad angle. And that was pretty much it. The Steelers had one more shot, and it wasn't even close. Ben was sacked 2 times in a row. Next thing you know, it's 4th and 29. And that 4th and 29 attempt was from their own goal line. It was just really pathetic. It didn't even come close to picking the 29 yards up. So the Steelers lost. Now they're 5-4-1. The real annoying thing about that outcome is that everybody else in the AFC North won on Sunday. The Ravens came from behind late and beat the Bears. The Bengals beat up the Raiders. The Browns, they survived the Lions, but they won, which was more than the Steelers could say a week earlier when they tied the Lions. So everybody else in the division won. The Steelers lost. So they lost ground. They are now 3rd in the AFC North, a game and a half out behind the Ravens. So 7 games left. And, if you're talking about the math, yeah, the Steelers have, nobody should be panicking. As we've discussed quite a bit. I know I wrote about it the other day. They still have 6 AFC games left. They still have 4 AFC North games left, including 2 against the Ravens. So there's definitely plenty of time to get things together. The question is, can they get it together? And, I just don't know if they have the team for it, even when healthy. They just don't have that roster. To repeat myself for the 1 millionth time, they're one of those football teams, the Steelers, the 2021 Pittsburgh Steelers, are one of those football teams that's a few plays away over the course of a year from finishing anywhere between 6-11, 11-6, 7-10, 10-7, that kind of record. They're one of those teams. And during their 4-game winning streak, they made a lot of crucial plays at the end to win games. And during this little, it's not really a losing streak. They tied and then they lost. They haven't made plays at the end to win games. So here they are at 5-4-1. If you're looking for some good news from Sunday's game, it's that Roethlisberger looked great, probably the best that he's looked all year. He made a lot of great throws, I thought, and I thought he showed a lot of great arm strength. So I don't know, maybe the week off, even though he had COVID, maybe the week off allowed him to rest and maybe get some strength back in that 39-year-old shoulder and elbow of his. But he looked great, and I think Deontay Johnson, it might have been the greatest game he's had as a Steeler. I thought he made a lot of great catches, a lot of tough catches, and I don't know how anybody. I remember people saying probably last year, maybe even this offseason, I think Ray McLeod should be in there ahead of Deontay Johnson, he's a bust. And I don't know why anybody ever thought that about Johnson, because he has trouble with drops and fumbles. And of course, he's going to drop another pass and he's going to fumble again at some point, and people are going to think that he's always that kind of a player. But, I think he's this close to being a superstar. And of course, Chase Claypool, having him back in the lineup for that passing attack. I mean, he's such a fantastic weapon, and he showed that, a few times on Sunday night. If they can start clicking as an offense, I don't know. I don't know if they have the capability of doing the things they did in the mid 2010s, because it was one quarter. It was the fourth quarter that they were playing so well. So they have to show me a lot more than that. But I think Najee Harris, he didn't have a great game on Sunday. For some reason, the sledding was pretty rough against a really poor rush defense. But I think he's pretty much the real deal. I think we can all agree on that. So if you get Roethlisberger playing a little bit better, and of course those receivers playing better, Pat Freiermuth, and of course Najee Harris, I think you maybe can do some things over the second half of the year. As for the defense, it's just a matter of getting healthy. And on that note, Sean Manahan sends us a $5 super chat. And thank you, Sean. And he says, when healthy, they could beat anyone. Well, yeah, I mean, they could beat anyone. I'm not. That's a little bit different than when healthy they can be a juggernaut, because I don't think even when healthy they're a juggernaut. No, but when healthy, yeah, they've showed they can beat anyone. If you consider what the Bills, one of the best teams in the NFL, then yeah, when healthy, they can beat anyone. Again, that doesn't mean that they're a contender, like a bona fide Super Bowl contender. They're just one of those teams that's in the middle of the pack as far as talent. And when you're in the middle of the pack like that, you can beat anyone in the NFL. So as far as this Sunday, as far as the health, they travel to Paul Brown Stadium to take on the Bengals. TJ Watt's going to play, which is fantastic news. I mean, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but they haven't really looked that great this year without TJ Watt. I think we're going on, about 2 full games without him, close to it, or maybe 3 full games, because he's missed 2 games completely due to injury, and he's missed halves of others. So yeah, 3 full games almost, and they have not looked like the same team without him. And you throw Fitzpatrick back in there. From what I read, Joe Hayden is questionable, so that's unfortunate. But at least you're getting 2 of your best defensive players back. Certainly your best defensive player and Watt, your best player overall. So having Watt and Fitzpatrick back will be huge for them this Sunday. So to your point, Sean, when healthy, they can beat anyone. Well, getting healthy on defense for them is going to be paramount, because that's the strength of their team. So that's big news for this Sunday. Hopefully Hayden can play. Although I've liked what I've seen from James Pierre. I think we all have. And of course, Cam Sutton, he played his behind off the other night in LA. He's just really having a great year, really, as a full-time starter. So kudos to him. I think he's showing them why. He's showing us all, I guess, why they loved him so much coming out of college in 2017, and why they've always been so high on him. You always hear so much about how intelligent he is and how you can put him anywhere in a secondary, and he's shown that. I mean, he can play on the outside, he can play in the slot, he can play safety. The guy's just a valuable asset to them, and it's nice to see him starting to step things up. And the only unfortunate part about that is you're weakened a bit in the slot whenever he has to play outside, because because you don't have Joe Hayden. And then you have guys like Arthur Millette in the slot. And he's pretty good in the Mike Hilton role of playing close to the line of scrimmage and bringing a lot of intensity and bringing an edge. But he's not great in coverage. So that's the only downside. But on that note, at the 2028 mark, I will close out the first half of tonight's show. If you're watching me live on YouTube or Facebook, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right back in a jiffy. If you're listening to me on an audio platform, well, I thank you for downloading part 1. But please hurry up and download part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. And welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, as always, Tony Defio. And if you are watching me live on YouTube or Facebook, thank you for sticking with me. I told you I'd be back. And if you downloaded part 2, I thank you for that. And let's see who else we have in the live chat. Tom Ferry on from Facebook, The Cuda, Brian Brown, Stacy Lynn, if I didn't get you already, Christopher 11, Clarence Washington, Steelers Freak, Brittany Lemmy. So, and John is here from YouTube. So thank you, everybody, for joining in. And I got to get to this from Kathy Ford. And she says, if I can find it, I was scrolling through. I noticed it, and she says, I don't know, Tony. I think our season is over. As much as I love our Steelers, I have a feeling that we are done. I mean, I think it could go either way, really, because that's the kind of team that they are. They've been playing on the edge all year. It can go either way. When you don't play with consistency, game in and game out, when you don't have that kind of roster, then yeah, I mean it could implode. We've seen them implode. Going back to 2018, they've imploded every year. So hopefully that doesn't happen this year. But they're going to have to make hay. And how do they make hay? Starting this Sunday against the Bengals. They have to win that game. You win that game, suddenly you're what? What are they now? 1-1 in the AFC North, 2-1 with 3 games left in the division. That would be a good start. And, we know how much the Steelers have owned the Bengals over the years, but that hasn't applied lately. The Bengals, they beat them up last year. About a year ago at this time, last December in Cincinnati, just beat them up, out physical them. We know the play by was it Sean Bell, the safety, when he crushed Juju Smith-Schuster on a pass over the middle, causing him to fumble. So and you saw what they did in week 3 here. At Heinz Field, they beat up the Steelers pretty good. I mean, the Steelers were injured. TJ Watt was out in that game. I believe Alex Highsmith was out. I think he was. But a lot of players were injured, and the defense wasn't that great. The offense was really bad. So they need to reestablish that dominance over the Bengals, or at least let them know that they're still their big brother. Easier said than done. Joe Burrow is a fantastic talent. Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon. They have a pretty decent defense. Not a great defense, but a pretty decent defense. So it's going to be a challenge. And, the Bengals are every bit the contender that the Steelers are this year. Everybody in the AFC North is in a dogfight for the top spot. So, really, with 7 games left, it's anybody's division. So that's pretty exciting. But I think the Steelers have to win this game, and if nothing else, just for their own sake, for their own psyches. I mean, you lose this game, suddenly you're 5-1. You're essentially on a 3-game winless streak. It's a bad time of year to have that. So just for their own psyches, they need to win this game. But just for the simple math of it, they need to win this game. They can't fall further behind the Browns the Ravens, and they can't fall into fourth place. Even though there would still be 3 games left in the division and 6 games left overall, having to leapfrog 3 different teams to get into first place, that's hard to do. So they have to win this game. So as I said in the first half of the show, having TJ Watt back is going to help. Having Fitzpatrick back is going to help. Having Ben coming off his best game this year is going to help. So, yeah, they just need to go to Cincinnati and find a way to pull out a win. So I have one more topic, and I want to talk about Cam Heyward. And I touched on this on Monday on The Hangover with Brian and Shannon White, and I published an article about this on Friday, and that's the love affair everybody is having with Cam Heyward this year, and the recognition he's finally getting. I think people have always appreciated what he can do, but his overall greatness, his legacy, I think a lot of people, including myself, took that for granted because you've had so many star players come through here, even though the defense has struggled over the past decade. But even when the defense was struggling, you had obviously Big Ben playing better than ever, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, a great line. That part of the that side of the ball, they were all the superstars of the team, and the reason why they were contenders. So Heyward's play may have been overlooked, and of course the last 4 years with T.J. Watt as one of the premier defensive players in the NFL. I mean, that's people maybe it's easy to overlook Heyward when Watt's doing his thing week in and week out, but this year, with the defense being so compromised by injury, to see him just dominating the line of scrimmage each and every week. And I mean, he has really nobody next to him making plays. Isaiah Buggs, just another player. Carlos Davis has just started to get healthy. Henry Mondeau is a nice story, but he's just a backup. Isaiah Loudermilk is showing promise, but promise doesn't necessarily mean greatness, and he really hasn't made that signature play, that coming out play, I should say, for a rookie. So he really has had no star power next to him on the line, and he's dealing with double teams all the time, and he's still dominating and just playing like one of the top 2 or 3 defensive linemen in the NFL. Even at the age of 32, you talk about Aaron Donald, and Heyward's name isn't far behind when you're talking about the top players at that position. So kudos to Cam Heyward. I people are going to argue that he doesn't deserve the Hall of Fame talk that he's starting to receive the last couple of years, but sometimes that honor goes beyond stats. You can just look at a player and see that player is a Hall of Famer. So I don't know if he'll ever get in, but the fact that he's now in the discussion and he still has who knows how many more years to play, I think that says a lot about him. And the fact that Brian and Shannon and me, we were putting Heyward in different eras on Monday on The Hangover. Would he be able to start for the steel curtain of the 70s? Would he be able to start in the 80s? Would he be able to start for Cowher's teams in the 90s or Dick LeBeau's defenses of the mid to late 00s? The fact that he's even in that discussion, I think that shows you how respected he is now. So I just think he's an amazing player, and whether you think he's a Hall of Famer or not, he's certainly an all-time Steeler great. I think this year has solidified that. So those are my topics for tonight, and I will finish out tonight's show with some questions and comments from you guys. Let's see what we have here. This is from Christopher 11, and he says, let's withhold judgment till we get our guys back. Our D is as good as any team when full strength. Maybe offense can take next step after a loss to the Chargers. Well, I'll definitely, as far as the defense, I will agree that when healthy, it's one of the best defenses in the NFL. So that's why these guys have to get as healthy as possible, and that's why it would be nice to see Devin Bush step up his game and start playing like a top 10 overall draft pick. So hopefully that happens soon. And Steelers Freak says, when they play 4 quarters of good football, I will celebrate like a Super Bowl win. Well, I don't think many teams do that nowadays. It's hard to put 4 great quarters together. And this is one from Daniel, and he's citing our very own Dave Schofield, one of our editors, and he says that Dave Schofield said that the Steelers are 0-7 without Joe Hayden in the lineup. I didn't know that. That's kind of alarming. So hopefully he plays this week. Sean Manahan says if the Steelers had Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick, they probably wouldn't beat the Chargers. Yeah, it's hard to argue that when you're talking about a game that came down to the last few minutes, 1-score game. It's hard to imagine the Chargers scoring 41 points with both Watt and Fitzpatrick in the lineup. I mean, those are two of the top players at their positions in the NFL. So yeah, I agree. Another one from Sean Manahan. He says our defensive depth is just flat out atrocious. I think you can say that for a lot of teams on both sides of the ball, really. When you're talking about 2021, salary cap era, so many players move around in free agency. It's hard to have the kind of depth that we remember back in Bill Cowher's heyday when I talked about this before, when, they would never even bother signing any of their veteran players when they were at the end of their contracts. They would just let them walk because they had these great backups lying in wait. Back then, players could wait around 3 or 4 or 5 years and then start. Jason Gillen's a great example of that. I think he was with them for 3 years before he cracked the line, maybe 4 years. Lee Flowers, he wasn't a great player, but he was just a special teams guy for a number of years, for 2 or 3, 4 years, and he became their starting strong safety in the late 90s through the early 00s. So it's hard to keep that. It's hard to have that kind of depth nowadays, and mainly because I think the quarterback salaries are just so high that they eat up so much of the cap that it's hard to have that kind of depth. And I think, especially these rookie players, they're looking to cash in on their second contract. So it's hard to keep them content as backups when it's their time to move on after their 4th year or 5th year. They're looking to cash in and they're looking to start somewhere else. If they're not guaranteed that here, they're moving on to someplace else. Sean Manahan says somebody needs to step up on a defensive line to help Cam out. Yeah, but I don't know. It's Stephon Tuitt's a special talent for a reason. Same with Alu. It's hard to ask guys like Buggs and Davis and players of that ilk to play to that level, because those guys are special talents. Daniel talking about Tyler Boyd. He says, Pittsburgh's own Tyler Boyd, by the way. He went to the University of Pittsburgh. That's a Bengals receiver. And he said, Boyd was talking so much trash after the loss to the Bengals, saying that the Steelers quit. I mean, it really wasn't trash talk. He was kind of talking in a matter-of-fact kind of way. But, that game was one of the most listless Steeler games I've ever seen, at least in recent memory. So maybe Boyd had a point there. But that's probably something that Mike Tomlin is not letting his players forget this week. This guy said that you quit last time and you didn't give 100%. Are you gonna stand back and take that, or are you gonna do something about it? People talk about how Juju's logo dancing last year, his TikTok dancing on other teams' logos, was a motivating factor. Well, if an opponent saying you quit, a divisional rival saying you quit the last time you played them, if that's not a motivating tool, I don't know what is. So let's hope they can use that for fuel this week. Brian Brown says the Steelers have to win every game. I wouldn't say every game, but the margin for error is slipping. It's becoming smaller each and every week. I mean, you saw on Thursday, the Bills won. The Bills are right there with, in the playoff race. They're 7-4. Pittsburgh beat them in week 1. So there's the head-to-head. Well, I guess that doesn't even matter anymore with the tie. But the Bills won. The Raiders won. They came back and beat the Cowboys on a last-second field goal. So those are two teams that might be battling Pittsburgh for that last wild card spot, or one of the last wild card spots. I mean, we talk about the Bills being one of the premier teams in the NFL, but the Patriots won't stop losing, or I'm sorry, they won't stop winning. They look like they look like they have the best defense in the NFL right now, and Mac Jones is playing pretty darn good for a rookie quarterback. So, the Bills might not even win the AFC East this year. It might be the Patriots yet again. So, the Bills and the Raiders are two teams that you might have to battle for a wild card spot if you can't come back and win or reclaim the division title, the AFC North. So, yeah, they have to keep pace, and they have they don't have to win every game, I don't think, but they certainly can't lose too many more. And Steelers Freak says of Matt Canada, if Canada has anything in reserve on the books, this weekend is the time to pull it out. The interesting thing about that, excuse me, is that you heard a lot of talk when Roethlisberger was talking to the reporters last week about how, he was calling a lot of plays at the end again and calling a lot of the blocking, the protection for his linemen. So, is this another example of Roethlisberger taking over the offense at the end? And if that's the case, then maybe Canada doesn't have anything left to show, at least not this year. We'll see. Mark DeGoradis says, I think Spillane should start over Bush. I mean, you might be able to make a case that he should start over either one of those guys, and not because he's such a great player, but because Schobert and Bush really aren't, you have to throw Joe Schobert into the mix too. He really hasn't lived up to what they expected of him as a pass coverage linebacker when they traded for him last August. So, I think Spillane's a better athlete than people give him credit for. He's an undrafted free agent, so people naturally think he's just a blue collar type player. But I think he's a decent enough athlete. So, I think he has the capabilities of he's certainly probably the best run stuffer of the three of them, and he's probably better in pass coverage than people give him credit for. And at this point, how much worse can you be than what Devin Bush has shown us through 10 games? So I don't think he's going to start over Bush, but Tomlin hasn't been exactly. I don't know if he's been publicly displeased with Bush, but he can't be very pleased with his play privately. I know that because the team invested so much in him when they drafted him 2 years ago. So, it would be nice if Devin Bush, if something clicked for him. Lawrence Timmons. Remember Lawrence Timmons, first round pick of 2007. People waited years for him to finally put it all together, and he really didn't start putting. He showed a lot of promise over his first 4 or 5 years, but he didn't really become that Pro Bowl caliber player that you expected him to be when Pittsburgh drafted him. Was it 15th overall in 2007? But in 2012, something just clicked, and the last 5 years here, he was a machine. He was a fantastic inside linebacker for them. So maybe the same will be we'll be able to say the same thing about Devin Bush in the not so distant future. Hopefully, as quickly as this Sunday. Somebody asked me, I lost it. There's so many questions, which is great, by the way. Somebody asked me what my thoughts are on the Sunday against the Bengals. I think they're going to pull out a win. I'm looking for like 20-13 kind of a win. Not a pretty sight for the offense. Just an okay performance, but the defense is going to be fantastic again with Watt and Fitzpatrick back. Steeler Chick 46 says of Cam Heyward, he's like fine wine. He gets better with age. He certainly. You can say that. I mean, he's been playing his best football the last 3 or 4 years, really. All right. Clarence Washington says Cam Heyward should be getting more national attention. Yeah, I think he is. But guys like Booger McFarland and Chris Collinsworth have really spoken highly of him at different points the last couple of years. So, that's pretty cool. All right. There's another one from Steelers Freak, and he says about Isaiah Loudermilk. When in, the opponent's average 2.8 yards per rush. Loudermilk needs more snaps. Who cares if he is a rookie? The inside linebackers need D-line help for in order to avoid being caught up in the wash. And I talked about that last week. Part of the problem with the inside linebackers is they're just not staying clean because of the defensive line. And, if Loudermilk is showing promise, I agree. He should be in there. I mean, Buggs hasn't, been anything. Davis has barely played. Mondoza, if his name wasn't Henry Mondo, I don't know if people would be as excited about him. He's like one of those blue collar, lunch pail, blah, blah, blah kind of players. So, yeah, there's definitely room there. There's definitely a talent vacuum on the defensive line for somebody to fill. So, if Loudermilk is showing the most promise, then maybe he should be in there more often. Clarence Washington says for the defense to be at its best, they need more production from the inside linebackers. They certainly do. They certainly do. I keep going back to this unnamed NFL executive who said, if you're slow at inside linebacker, if you're unspectacular at inside linebacker, then that affects the rest of your defense. And I think we've seen that on many occasions with the struggles of Bush and Schobert, namely Bush, because he's a higher pedigreed player. They expect more of him. And that's true. And that's why they struggled so much when Shazier went down, when he was lost with that tragic injury, and why they struggled for so many years on defense without him. Not so many, a couple of years for sure. They had a lot of trouble. So you need Bush, namely Bush, to step up at some point. You know, if you're heading into year 4 and he still hasn't shown anything, you're talking about a year and a half removed from that knee injury, then I think it speaks more about his abilities than it does about the injury. So hopefully at some point it's going to click for Devin Bush. Ryan O'Toole asked, Tony, how was your Thanksgiving? It was pretty good, nice and quiet, usual. You know, I watched some football, did some writing, went out, did some running, went for a nice long walk, went over to my mom's. Didn't stuff myself too much, which was nice. Usually I go overboard in that regard, but I didn't do that this year. Of course, I knew I had to be up bright and early on Friday morning for my shadow day at my new job. And that was pretty taxing physically. So, you know, while everybody else is gaining weight this holiday season, I get the feeling I'm going to be losing weight, which is nice. So thank you for that, Ryan. I hope your Thanksgiving was great and pleasant and fulfilling and all those awesome things. And on that note, I think I am going to call it a night. I have the tickle in my throat, and I'm going to keep coughing, so I might as well just end it here at the 47:32 mark. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I hope you enjoy the Steelers game on Sunday at 1 o'clock. I hope the Steelers give us something awesome to talk about. Starting on Monday on The Hangover with Brian and Shannon and yours truly. And that's the next time I will talk to you. So until then, once again, have a great weekend and go Steelers.